So Iran basically is the number one sponsor of state terrorism on the planet Earth. Their ultimate goal is to put Sharia Islamic jihadist fundamental reign on the world, the whole world. And they don't do it directly, although they have. They've attacked Israel with 350 drones and missiles a few months ago. They have proxies. It's like an octopus with tentacles. So they have the Hezbollah in Lebanon. They have the Houthis in Yemen. They have Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And what they do with these proxies is, and they also have groups in Iraq as well and in Syria. And what they do with these proxies is they're armed and funded by Iran, and the idea is basically to come out and attack the Zionist entity from all sides and all borders.
These are cuts from an interview with Dr. Tuvia Book. Dr. Book is an IDF medic that actually fought his way back into Israel's IDF following the events of October 7th, 2023. A full-length version of this interview, roughly an hour in length, is over at godinthenutshell.com, going over the past, present, and future, meaning the prophetic future of Israel. The content of these segments of the interview are quite simply, are you entering World War III, and is war about to start inside of Israel? Dr. Tuvia Book is part of the Temple Institute, which is also where God in the Nutshell gets the Trump Cyrus coins from, with the temple on the back. Without further ado, these segments of this interview are, well, they're quite simply, are you on the edge of walking into, or are you already in, World War III?
The one great thing about terrorist organizations is they're not subtle. They say and they write exactly what they want to do, which is wipe the Jewish people off the planet Earth and their homeland. It's written all over their charter, that total and utter destruction of our homeland and the Jewish people. They say it even after October the 7th. They said, our aim is to repeat October the 7th again and again and again. So you can't say you don't know what they want to do. That's what they want to do. That is their raison d'etre, and anything justifies it. The death of their own people by the thousands justifies. Anything justifies the end, justifies the means. Sorry, the means justify the end, which is the obliteration of the Western way of life, the Judeo-Christian way of life. That is what Hamas is about.
Where do you think this goes? You've given me some opinions on this yesterday when we talked. Where do you think all of this goes? Where do you think this leads to?
Well, it depends on what happens next. I mean, there's three different options. One is that the worst case scenario, there is a global conflict. In other words, Israel right now, and it's not a secret, it's in public sphere, has 3 military divisions on the northern border. They have 1 in Gaza, 3 on the northern border. And it's like a tinder, like before World War I, they were just waiting for that spark that ignites the whole tinder. And that's what's happening right now. If Hezbollah kill too many civilians, and it's very, very close. Just a few days ago, 12 innocent Druze, Arab, Israeli children were killed on playing soccer on a Saturday, and people thought that was going to be the spark that causes the war. Israel seems to have taken a different approach for now. I mean, obviously, I'm not very high up, but for now, their approach seems to be very specific, targeted assassinations of the leaders of all the terror groups around here. And if that war starts, that could be rapidly turn into a global conflict. The United States just 2 days ago sent an entire fleet of warships, including an full-on nuclear aircraft carrier, to the region. And that's option number one. There could be a full-scale, almost Armageddon-like global conflict. Because if Israel goes into Lebanon, then Iran might directly attack Israel, then the United States might be drawn in, then Russia might be drawn in, and basically it's like a snowball effect.
Yes.
You just keep on going and going and going until it's an entire global conflict. That is the worst case scenario. And both sides are trying to avoid that, but we'll see. The middle case scenario is a more localized conflict, which is where the Hezbollah, who are the Iranian-backed proxy in Lebanon, but they are far more powerful than Hamas. It's estimated they have 120,000 missiles aimed at anywhere in Israel with much more accuracy and much more expensive and sophisticated missiles than Hamas ever had, provided once again by Iran. And they are Shia, like their Iranian masters. So it's estimated that they could destroy thousands of innocent people in Israel if there was that type of war. So what Israel ideally would like them to do is to go back 20 miles to the Litani River in Lebanon, as they are obligated to by international treaty. That was 2006. When the Second Lebanon War ended, they signed UN Resolution 1701 that said they need to go back to Litani River, and they promptly ignored it. That's the option Israel would like. And the third, which is not really an option, is to carry on this war of attrition. But that it can't carry on like this, because Israel basically has given up, so to speak. The top 5 kilometers of Israel, 3 miles, are basically all the civilians have been evacuated. This war is costing Israel $300 million a day, because we have 160,000 internally evacuated Israelis, in addition to the military expenditure as well, and they all have to be housed and schooled as well. And the entire north of Israel is just abandoned as a battle zone, which is antithesis to Zionism, which is all about settling the Holy Land. So this can't go on.
This is really a religious war from their view, is it
Absolutely,
not?
100%.
What do you feel like their objective is? I know their objective is to do away with Israel, but why do they believe that?
Israel is the little Satan. The big Satan, as far as they're concerned, is the United States of America. Israel just happens to be the United States representative in the region. Their aim, very simply, is to establish an Islamic caliphate over the entire global surface. And they view America as the Judeo-Christian values of the United States as their number 1 enemy, and Israel is the local number 2 enemy. Big Satan, little Satan. It's that simple. I don't even need to waffle on. It's that simple. It's a war of darkness against light.
What is the difference between Sunni and Shiite, or do you know?
It all goes back to the founding of Islam, and it depends on who was the heir of Muhammad. It's that simple. The majority of Muslims, there's about 2 billion Muslims in the world, between 1.5 to 2 billion Muslims in the world. Majority of them are Sunni, and they believe that Islam, which was founded in 622 CE or AD, they believe that the first prophets were basically descendants, direct biological descendants of Muhammad himself. And the Shia, who's a much, much smaller faction, Shia Muslims only really, their main country is Iran. And all the other Arab countries are Sunni countries. And the Shia believe that it wasn't direct descent of Muhammad, rather it was through a brother-in-law and a nephew and a different descent. That's the original split.
So there's mainly Sunni and Shiite are the two groups, and they're at conflict. Are they at conflict with each other?
Absolutely. If you can, it was kind of like during the Reformation with Christianity, where you had the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church and all the religious wars, the 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War, the Huguenots and the Catholics in France. It's the same kind of thing. In other words, they are the same religion ostensibly, but they have different theological beliefs within the religion, so it's a fraternal war. That was the Iran-Iraq War as well back in the 80s.
Well, do you see this amping up now? It's they're amping it up for some reason at the moment. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely. And I'm not a prophet, and the stakes are pretty high, and the region now is on absolute red hot tension right now, and super state of alert. Yeah.
What is their objective in shooting all these rockets? What are they? So what are they doing when you hear frequently that they're shooting rockets into Israel's borders? What are they doing when they're doing that?
They want to reap mayhem and chaos, and it's actually working very well. They know that Israel has anti-missile defenses, the Iron Dome missile sets. They also know that Israelis have got bomb shelters, and they know there's very little chance of mass civilian casualty, even though they would like that. The opposite is not true of Hamas. They're the highest recipient per capita of global aid. I'll say that again, just in case you missed that. They are the highest recipient per capita of global aid. The question is, where's that billions of dollars going to that the globe, including American taxpayers, are paying? It's not going to building bomb shelters. It's not going to build a peaceful infrastructure. It's not going to make Gaza into Singapore, which it could, by the way. It has the situation there. It has the coastal plain. There's rich agriculture. When Israel unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza Strip 20 years ago, they left all the infrastructure there. However, that billions of dollars has gone to two places. One is to the bank account of the founders, Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated 2 days ago in Tehran by an incredible Mossad operation, even though they won't officially admit it. Everyone knows they did it. He had a bank account with $6 billion in. You say, what has he ever done? He has $6 billion. The answer is nothing. He's stolen it all from international aid money. And the top 5 people in Hamas are all billionaires on your state's money. So I would like to thank the American people for funding Hamas. And the rest of the money, and all Western civilization who funds it, the rest of the money was all put into terror infrastructure. Massive tunnel systems, the size of bigger than London's underground, masses of weapons being poured in through the Egyptian side of the border. And that's what the money was used for. And the idea basically is, once they attack Israel, Israel will attack them. And then what they want, and it sounds antithetical to you or to me or to anyone who values life, they want death. It's a cult of death. They want thousands of their own people to be killed as cannon fodder. They even tell them, when Israel bombs, you go on the roof and make, and the reason why is they want to bring the liberal, I would say, anti-religious, radical left out onto the streets to demonstrate and put pressure on Israel. And it's working. Look at American college campuses, look at British college campuses, look at burning American flags last week in Washington and this week in New York. Look what's going on in London. Every single Saturday there's a march of 100,000 radical jihadists calling for the destruction of the Western world. And that's what they want. So they're thinking that the pressure by having their own people killed and a war that they started will bring the collapse of the state of Israel and ultimately the United States. That's what the end goal is.
So let me get this straight. So the largest recipient of aid are these terrorist groups, fundamentally, and
or the Palestinian people, but they don't actually get to see any of that.
What is the and they're angling, and these groups are pushing for. So they just keep provoking you, and they're really pushing for World War III.
Mm-hmm.
What is the Gaza Strip? So someone here in America, what is the Gaza Strip? How did that come to be? What was kind of a short from your view? What is the Gaza Strip?
Okay, so very quickly, historically, very much historically, in the Bible times, it was never part of the Holy Land itself. It was controlled by the Philistines, and they control the main cities today. 2 of them still exist, Ashkelon and Ashdod, and Gath, that's where Goliath was from. And they were Phoenician, in other words, what's today Lebanon. They were Phoenician peoples. They control that coastal area, and they were very much a thorn in the side of the biblical Israelites. First of all, militarily, they were superior for many years because they had iron, whilst the Israelites only had bronze. They were much more into Iron Age, and they were a vicious enemy. And that was the case all the way till the time of King David, which is about 3,000 years ago, and he finally managed to get the upper hand. And they basically vanished from the stage about 3 millennia ago, the original Philistines who lived there. The Gaza Strip afterwards, in much more modern history, during the Ottoman period, which was between 1517 and 1917 when the British came, there was never a country called Palestine. It was always this region was always part of a much larger empire. When the Second Temple was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 AD, Judea was part of the Roman Empire, and then became part of the Byzantine Empire, then became part of the early Arab Empire, then became part of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem for 200 years, then part of the Abu Haid Empire, then it's always part of someone else's empire, and eventually part of the Ottoman Empire for 400 years, and then the British Empire for about 30 years in the 20th century. And people lived everywhere. There just happened to be a concentration of initially Jews and Muslims and Christians lived in the Gaza area during the Byzantine period. They even found a synagogue there and a church there, and still a church in Gaza today, by the way, by the port area. And then gradually, over the centuries, the Jews, for various reasons, the Christians, for various reasons, moved away. There's one small Christian community still in Gaza, but the majority of people living there are Muslim. In 1947, when the British had had enough of being here, they threw the whole problem to the United Nations. And they said, listen, we can't be here anymore. We're war-weary. We have 100,000 soldiers here against 600,000 Jews. And the attrition's driving us crazy. And our empire is collapsing. And we have a lot of poverty back home. And we've had enough. They wanted to wash their hands. So the United Nations sent a special committee to the Holy Land called UNSCOP, United Nations Special Committee on Palestine. And they decided they were going to partition what had been partitioned. Because initially, when the British promised the homeland to Jewish people back in 1917, the Balfour Declaration, they promised what is today Israel and Jordan. However, in 1921, they lopped off 76% and made another country called Transjordan, and that was forbidden to Jews to live in. So the little sliver that was left, what we today call Israel and the territories, was about a quarter of the original mandate. And the UNSCOP came and said, we need to divide that quarter again between a Jewish and a Jewish Palestinian, because everyone was Palestinian then, because it was the British mandate to Palestine, to a Jewish Palestinian homeland and an Arab Palestinian homeland. And Jerusalem, the holy city to the three faiths, to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, was supposed to be an internationally administered United Nations zone. And what ultimately happened is that the Jews said, okay, we'll take it, we're desperate. Even without control of Jerusalem, where 1 out of 6 Jews lived and had a Jewish majority for centuries already, they said, we lost so many of our people, 2/3 of the Jews in Europe were murdered because they didn't have Israel. We need to have a homeland. Now we'll take even this crazy truncated state, which is basically divided up into 3. Just so you understand, after the 6-Day War, when we became 3 times bigger, our borders were a quarter of the size as what they were back in 1948. So, in a much smaller territory with much more borders. They're basically indefensible. And Gaza, to answer your question, that was part of the Arab state. However, the Arabs rejected that UN partition plan. It's called back in November the 29th, 1947, and they invaded Israel. And when the war, what we call the War of Independence, was over in 1949, that Gaza Strip area ended up being part of Egypt. They basically took it over. They didn't formally annex it. And what's called the West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, biblical heartland, that was actually annexed by Jordan, even though both those areas were supposed to be part of the Arab Palestinian state, but they rejected the whole partition plan, right? And therefore, when Israel took over in 1967 and the 6-Day War, they took over what Jordan called the West Bank, because it was their West Bank, or Judea and Samaria, and the Gaza Strip, and it was very densely populated. And basically, they said, we'll prepare to withdraw again for peace. And the Arabs said, no peace, no recognition, and no negotiation with Israel. And that's what the Gaza Strip is. So basically, until 1990, about 3/4 of the Gaza Strip was Muslim, and a quarter at the bottom was where Jews settled back in an area called Gush Katif. And then Israel unilaterally withdrew in 2003, and the answer was, we're going to withdraw, and you can build up your Singapore. Instead, they built up the world's greatest terror state.
Well, tell me let's go right there. What is a Palestinian? What does this mean?
So Arab nationalism is something that's very recent. It's from the 20th century. And if you look at a map of the Middle East before World War I, all the countries that we're familiar with today, Jordan, Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, none of those countries existed. It was just the Ottoman Empire. It was this vast stretch of land controlled from Constantinople, which later renamed Istanbul, because in 1453, Istanbul, the last bastion of the Eastern Roman Empire, fell to the Arabs, to Islam. And when you think about it from a historical point of view, as an American, as you are, it was just a couple of decades before Columbus sailed to America. In other words, the Eastern Roman Empire, which was Christian, lasted all the way through till the 15th century. So it was finally overrun for the last time by Islam. And the Ottoman Empire that replaced it, if you want to talk Turkey, they basically controlled the entire region. And there was no separate countries. It was just the Ottoman Empire. However, during World War One, because the Ottomans sided with the German and Austro-Hungarians against the British, French, Russians, and ultimately the Americans, when they lost the war, their empire was divided up between the empires. And that's how Arab nationalism started. Basically, the British and the French sat there with rulers in Paris and London and just basically divided up the land. If you ever look at the border of Jordan, it's not following any mountain ranges or rivers. It's just straight lines.
Right.
And same with Lebanon. When Israel is, you got the Galilee in the north of Israel, and then you got Lebanon. But as someone who's crossed over into Lebanon, it doesn't just dramatically change when you cross over this man-made border. It's exactly the same landscape. So basically, for example, the story of Elijah and the widow, that took place in what's today Lebanon, but back in Bible times, that was just part of the land of Israel. So the Arab nationalism started about 100 years ago, more or less, during the time of World War I, World War II, and that's what the concept of the Palestinian is even more recent. Because, as I mentioned, until the end of the British Mandate, everyone who lived here was Palestinian, including the Jews. So the Palestinian Symphony Orchestra was Jews. The Palestinian football team was Jews. Everyone had Palestinian passports. Everyone was Palestinian because that was just the name of this province that the British ruled. Again, it's a province. There's never been a country ever called Palestine. It's always a province of a much larger empire. It's a relatively new term with no history.
Talk to me about Israel. So Israel began in modern history again with would have been in the Balfour Declaration. Is that?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So the Balfour Declaration, and then you have just a brief version of that. How this is kind of leading into prophecy. And why they want Israel, because it's a prophetic land. They want those biblical sites under their control, under their hand.
Again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to go to the Temple Mount today, and you see there is a mosque on top. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is on top. There is a Muslim shrine, the famous Dome of the Rock with the gold dome. But if you look underneath it, you see the founding walls of the Second Temple, the Western Wall, the Southern Wall, the Eastern Wall, all still standing. So you don't need to be a genius to figure out that what's underneath came before what's on top. So whatever they say about, Jews, colonial occupiers, excuse me, here are the stones of the temple that stood for a millennia, and way on top of it is your added-on shrine of your religion that only started in the 7th century, the Common Era. So that's just basic,
That's a great point, actually.
History 101. Again, that's just very, very basic. So when the radical Muslims come along and say it's not a Jewish site, it's a Christian site, it's a Muslim shrine, when they talk about the Temple Mountain, no, it's not. So you can talk the talk as much as you want, but just like Islam was a very recent religion, so Arab nationalism is a very recent phenomena. And the idea of the Jews coming back to their land obviously has been an integral part of Jewish belief from time immemorial. All the synagogues face the Holy Land. Every Jewish wedding, they break the glass to remember they were not complete. Our temple was destroyed. We're waiting for the rebuilding of that third temple. All of our prayers and our grace after meals all point towards this yearning for Zion. There's always been a Jewish presence in Israel, even after destruction of the temple. When it became a lot more real was the 20th century. And the question you should have asked me is, why was the world's greatest superpower promising a bunch of Jews a return to the homeland, which hadn't happened for 2,000 years? That's the crazy question.
Yes. Well, okay. So do you know the answer to that question? So tell me your on the answer to that.
Right. So I've written a few books, and one of the books I wrote is called For the Sake of Zion, and it deals with 20th century Zionism. And there's a whole chapter on the British Mandate, these British years of control. So the Balfour Declaration was issued on the 2nd of November, 1917, and the famous opening sentence is, His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a Jewish homeland. Like, wow. The question is, why did Great Britain issue this probably most famous modern declaration of Zionism, and who are the people who issued it? So Lord Balfour, it's called the Balfour Declaration. He was Britain's foreign minister. And the Prime Minister was called David Lloyd George, and both of them, not coincidentally, were deeply religious Christians. They were believers, and they were also Philo-Semites, people who loved the Jews, and they were Christian Zionists. That's not a coincidence.
Yes.
So when people cynically say, oh, what, you're telling me the British were Zionists? Actually, yes. The two people who were behind it from the British government's point of view really were. David Lloyd George was Welsh, so he already had this chip on his shoulder about not being English and being a smaller minority. And both of them read their Bible, and both of them saw the prophecy was that the Jewish people need to return to the homeland, and they actively wanted to be part of that and help that. And those are the two big people who actually were behind the issuing of this declaration, which is incredible because that part's usually washed away in the history books.
Tell me about and this fulfills prophecy. For Israel to come back even in that year. Is that your understanding of that?
Absolutely. And one of the leadest British Army officers in the Mandate period was a guy called Charles Ord Wingate, you might have heard of.
Okay.
He was also evangelical Christian. He was an officer, and he basically helped found the ethos that later became the IDF, Fighting at Night, Special Mobile Forces.
Really?
Yes, and he's actually buried in Arlington National Cemetery.
At these sections, in the full-length interview with Dr. Tuvia, he's going to take you all the way back in time to the inception of Israel, walk you through the temple time periods. I highly recommend it. He's an absolute expert in these. I was stunned by this interview and his knowledge of the different periods of Israel's history, going all the way back, in truth, to Abraham. And out there, of course, Abraham gave a tenth of his tithe to this unusual king called Melchizedek. King and priest is what Melchizedek means. He was the king of Salem, or modern-day Jerusalem. He goes all the way back in time through the different ages and hours of history leading to this modern day, but specifically to the fall of the Second Temple time period. The time when the Second Temple fell is during the time of the Romans, and they ruled over the Hebrews, or the Israelites, or the Jews. And the Second Temple fell in roughly 70 AD underneath the Romans, and the Israelites lived under Roman control. I'll let him continue from that point.
But, and this is your Palestine question, the Roman emperor, his name was Hadrian, he said, those pesky Jews, they keep revolting all the time. I'm going to do something about it. So one thing he did is try to kill as many of the religious leaders as he could, because he figured those were the leaders of the rebellion, famous leaders like Rabbi Akiva. And he also killed a lot of Judeo-Christians as well. And the other thing he did was change the names of places. So he said, Jerusalem, now that sounds a bit too holy and religious for Jews and Christians. I'll name it after me instead. So he called it Aelia Capitolina. His name was Aelius Adrianus. Shechem, that's mentioned in the Bible quite a few times with Joseph. And so I'm going to change it and call it New City in Greek. So he called it Neapolis. And Arabs can't say peace. That became Nablus. It was renamed by the Romans in the 2nd century. And most importantly, I'm going to change the name of the country. Judea of the province sounds way too Jewish, like from the tribe of Judah. That's where Joseph, the father of Jesus, was descended from the tribe of Judah, from the house of David, right, where David was from. And to this very day, the symbol of Jerusalem is the Lion of Judah. That's a municipal symbol. Yeah. Sounds way too Jewish. So I'm going to change it to the Jews' arch enemy from Bible times, even though it didn't exist anymore, the Philistines. I'm going to call it Syria Palestina. So that's how the name first comes in historically.
Wow.
An attempt to de-Judaize any kind of Jewish or Christian connection to the Holy Land. He named it after the arch enemies, these pagans from the Bible who didn't even exist anymore.
Isn't that something? That is a stunning description of that you just did on a walkthrough.
This wall over here in shadow, that's the western wall as it looked back then. The southern wall, the temple itself, all this was rebuilt by Herod around the end of the 1st century BC. And today, when I take tours in Jerusalem itself, I take people under the ground and they see the actual foundations of the Second Temple onto itself. You can actually see the bedrock of Jerusalem and see how Herod just took anything away and rebuilt it from the bedrock up. And these are stones have never seen the light of day for 2 millennia. So they're perfect. You can still see the chisel marks from 2,000 years ago. Absolutely. I invite you all to come to the Holy Land and visit yourselves and literally walk in the footsteps. And And the Jews themselves and the Christians believe that the redemption will only come when the temple is once again built in Jerusalem as a place of light and a place of salvation. That's the belief, and that's what Jews hope for. It's Friday right now. We're going to the Sabbath services, and we pray for that. When we eat tonight, we're going to do the grace after meals. We say we should build up Jerusalem. Building up Jerusalem means that we want that third temple. And if you go to a Jewish wedding, before people get smashed, they smash a glass, right? Don't you ever seen that at every Jewish wedding? Which seems a strange thing to do. Like, why do you smash a glass at the happiest moment of your life? So remember that we're not complete because the third temple's not rebuilt. If you have a Jewish wedding in Jerusalem, they always take one of the musical instruments out of the band to show that we can't play with the full band because we can't fully celebrate until we have a third temple. So that very much is a belief in Judaism.
And what is the symbolism of the breaking of the glass again?
To show that the second temple was destroyed, and until the third temple is rebuilt, we have to remember that destruction. If you go to very observant Jewish houses like my brother and sister-in-law, when they paint their walls, they always leave a blank spot, and they say in Hebrew, "Shachor lavan zecher lechurban," which means black on white in memory of the destruction. 2,000 years later, they don't complete their houses because we're not complete without a third temple. And they always leave a little part incomplete. So there's a lot of symbolism showing the yearning of the Jews for that third temple to be rebuilt on the Temple Mount and Mount Moriah in Jerusalem.
These are portions of an interview with Dr. Tuvia Book. The book that he has is titled For the Sake of Zion. Over at God in a Nutshell, you should be able to easily find a far longer version of the interview with Dr. Tuvia Book that goes through one of his areas of expertise is the history of Israel, which is why I titled the full-length video, which I turned into a documentary, Israel, Past, Present, and Future, and that deals with the prophetic future of Israel. Dr. Tuvia Book is an expert in the temple periods and also the history of Israel itself, leading into the future and the days to come. He's also one of the lecturers and researchers for the Temple Institute. He also gives tours of Israel. I hope to visit and go on one of those one day. You ought to visit Israel yourself. But the Temple Institute is who God in a Nutshell got the original, these were called a conspiracy at one time, the Trump Cyrus coins with imagery of the temple on the back. I'm Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. I hope you'll come over and visit godinanutshell.com. We have an array of materials over there and videos that you can immediately stream, as well as the temple coins, the third temple coins with Trump and Cyrus on them. Again, I'm Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. God bless each and every one of you and your families, and pray for Israel and pray for this United States. God bless each and every one of you and your families on the other side of the screen.